Young, the Okanagan chapter chair. Uh, Thank you for everybody for coming out today. Lorraine, of course, for coming on virtually. All of us are in, of course, different locations here. I'm actually in Port Alberta right now, and I know everybody else on our team here is sitting in the Okanagan. So again, thanks for everybody for joining us today, and of course for continuing to support the Okanagan, Okanagan and National Will community. So what we're going to be asking is that if everybody could just have their mic on mute, because of course, if you don't, how we have it set up is that whoever is going to be speaking, that it's going to be kind of on that full screen. So of course, just a kind of a caution, unless you want us to see you dancing and doing whatever else that you're doing in the background as you watch this great webinar. What I'd like to do is just share with you a couple of upcoming events that we have. And so of course, our next event is coming up, and I'm very excited about this one as well. It's coming up in February, so February 18th at 9 a.m. Pacific. And what Amal's going to be talking about is she's going to be exploring strategies around how to overcome the imposter syndrome. So this is really about recognizing the patterns of self-sabotage, feeling like a fraud in our career. Our other events are that are upcoming in 2021, that if you go to our website, we have a whole schedule up there. And of course, this is actually hosted not only by the Okanagan chapter, but it's also hosted by all the other chapters that we have across Canada. How can you connect with us? Well, locally, we have the Okanagan chapter Facebook as well as Instagram. Nationally, you can connect with us on LinkedIn and on Twitter. What probably the main thing that I would really recommend for everybody in the WELL community, and if you like the events that we're hosting, is go to the womaninleadership.ca and sign up for our free network. As part of this, you will get a newsletter which showcases all of our events, and of course, leadership articles as well as job opportunities. So let's get into the session. Quite excited for our upcoming speaker here. I'm going to pass it off to Nika, who is our co-chair, and she's going to be introducing Lorraine. Nika?
Great. Thank you, Denise, and welcome everybody. It is with great pleasure to introduce our speaker, who confesses to be headstrong from birth, a coffee snob by choice, and a non-conformist by accident. She is a longtime advocate of human dignity and equity, and named as a woman to watch. Lorraine is an international ICF-certified professional coach, team specialist, and accomplished inspired speaker based out of Kelowna, BC. She's been working as a leadership coach since 2007 and is currently working on her master's certification. I am thrilled to have her as my leadership coach, as it is her trade and her art to inspire, influence, and coach leaders to create culture where values and meaningful purpose for all people matter. Thank you, Lorraine, for being here today and leading us on a discussion on everything lives in language, dirty little words that sabotage the female influence. Thank you, Lorraine, and very excited to hear what you have to say. Take it away.
Thank you. So while I am the facilitator and I've traveled these waters or this pathway or a different trajectory than you, I hold us as adventurers and curious learners along the same path of really wanting to make a difference, of career development, of making a difference in business and making a greater difference in life. So I'm really honored and pleased to be here. So today we're going to talk about dirty little words. Question: how old were you the first time you swore? So here's what I'd like you to do. Don't tell us a swear word, but in the chat box, if you don't mind, just telling us your name again, even though most of you have it on your little box. Tell us your name, what city you're calling in from, and how old you were when you used your first swear word. So we're not going to tell, we're not using this to track you, but let's just say hi to one another. Tell us your name, what city you're calling in from, and how old you were when you first swore. 5-ish. Yes, it's a past memory. Lots of young ones, old enough to learn the words, to know the words. That's great. That's great. So while they're coming in, it's just really fun. I really like all the question marks because, like, who really keeps track of these things? Here's the thing. Who decides what a swear word is? You know, what's foul language? What's profanity? What is a dirty little word? And today, let me be really clear, we're not talking about swearing. I'm not the swear police. It's not about that. Today, we're talking about everything lives in language. And it's really, as Nika said, part of my trade and my art to surface clarity. Because unless things are clear, we cannot address them unless they are. And as a female leader or someone who wants to lead more or to influence more, we take on little habits and defaults that are so ingrained in us that we may not realize that how we speak and how we communicate may sabotage the very influence that we want. So I'm going to share my screen with you right now and just pull up some of the slides so that it can really cement or land what's going to be helpful. What I'd like you to do is just think about what you might want to take away from here. You know, why did you self-select to show up at whatever time this is in your time zone? And you may, you know, sneak off and on the call, but you chose to show up. And what was that about? So let's look at everything living in language and those dirty little words. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. The neurochemistry of conversations. So there are biochemical triggers in our body and in the listener with every word we say. And, you know, Judith Glaser, who passed away, but wrote a really great book, which I highly recommend, called Conversational Intelligence. There was a quote from her in Psychology Today last fall, October, I think it was 2020. And she says, by understanding how our brain functions, communicates, and responds, we can reach our full potential. Because the brain does not understand French or English, the brain speaks neuroscience. So I'm going to give you a little background on what really happens in our brain when we use words that don't land or they belittle or demean what matters to us. I'm going to give you a list. It's just a start of a list. It may not be your list, but they are words that we often find ourselves using and may not recognize it. And then a tool, how to delete, strike through some of the words that keep popping up in our vocabulary and lessen the impact and the message that they want to make. Just before we go on, if you have a paper or pen or your phone handy that you can just open a screen, I'm going to ask you a question to surface clarity. That's my fun place. It's also the action place. The question I'm going to ask you may not be an easy one to answer. So let's just notice what comes up in us when the question is asked. It's a question that's going to be directed to the limbic part of our brain, the neurochemistry. The limbic part of our brain, the center of our brain, has no capacity for language. And I'm asking you a question about something that lives there. If you know the answer, fantastic. Jot a phrase down. And if you don't know the answer, just put a star beside the question. It's a really worthy question, and I'll explain why. First, here's a question. Why does all of this matter? Why does it matter what language we use? Well, the title itself talked about our language sabotaging our impact. So here's the question. What is the impact you want to make? What is the impact you want to make? What is the language for that? What is your purpose? What's the point in your career, in your business, in life? What's the point? Surface clarity so that we know why this matters. Again, if you can't find the answer, just leave it for another time. We'll easily move on from there. Words create worlds, 16,000 words a day, trillions of conversations, and yet scholarly research shows us that 9 out of 10 conversations miss the mark. I think I know what I told you. You think you know what you heard. But research shows us that our conversations miss the mark. We don't want our conversations to miss the mark. We don't want to be ignored or sidelined or dismissed or not have the impact for what matters. So what we're going today and what I'm going to show you now is a series of hardwired questions that run through our mind, our brain, especially in a new situation when we're meeting something where there's a potential relationship that may bring in more business, that will help in some way, that will help our impact in some way. So these questions run through our mind at a subconscious level. What do I need to learn to be successful in this environment? Your brain and your body is looking for that. How do I create value in this situation with others? How do I protect myself? And do I need to? Who likes me? Who's judging me? Can I trust them? And where do I belong and fit? So all those questions, you walk into a networking room, you are going to make a business proposal, you are out and about in your daily business, and you want impact, you want to influence, you want to make a difference. These are the questions that happen inside our mind and our brain as we're trying to find our place of belonging. And in so doing, we, as our culture has taught us, or we've assimilated, or we've chosen to along the way, we begin to use certain language that protects us from being judged, that protects us from people thinking ill of us. And in so doing, we demean, belittle, make small, make less visible what we want to communicate and the difference that we want to make. We want to save ourselves from certain emotions, the protection. We don't want to be humiliated. We don't want to be rejected. We don't want to be excluded. Basic human need, we want to belong, or anger, someone else's or ours. Territorial, status, power over, not power with. We don't want to be dismissed, and we don't want to be ignored. Let's just notice those words and how they landed in us as they appeared on the screen. Because we don't want these things, this is human. But in our female lives of leadership influence, let's consider if there are ways that we've protected ourselves, basic human protection, those chemicals, that cortisol that elevates what words may do. We've protected ourselves. So even when I say protect, look at my body language. It's like it makes small, it shrinks back. Words are rarely neutral. There's attachments to the words that we use. So again, our brain hears the words, but it understands the neuroscience and the chemical conversations that are really happening. So I'd like to just stop and do a little poll right now. So there is a poll that if we look at these words and say, which of these emotions are triggered in you? So when you're triggered in a conversation or prior to a conversation, what's the most common emotion that surfaces within you? So we'll just give you a few seconds, go through these. And what is the most common emotion that is triggered within you? Just take a minute, click on something that really resonated with you. And when we have most people having responded, then we'll close the poll and we'll share that. Notice what your body is feeling because it lives in you when you think of this.
What does that?
Oh, I think someone's, just make sure everyone else is mute so we don't hear your private conversations. And let's share the results of the poll. Let's notice that. So many of these are common to many people. Let's just notice it. Let's normalize it. But let's notice, for example, just because there's one in red that more of you checked on, is what we might do to protect ourselves from being rejected and how there may be language that we use to protect ourselves. Thank you. You can close the poll and we'll really talk about conversational intelligence and how it gives us the power. So the words that we use in conversation, how it gives us a power to influence our neurochemistry, even in the moment. We want to belong, we want to feel safe, and we can do that. Let's notice, what I'd like to invite you to now is to do this little exercise with me to notice how the neurochemistry part of it lives in us, and it's a chemical thing that happens at a non-conscious level. I'm going to tell you the exercise so that you don't have to protect yourself, but I'm going to invite you to do this. So what we're going to do, or invite you to do, is we're going to put ourselves in a position of feeling like we're going to be rejected. You know, that anticipation. And so maybe our shoulders will be slumped, our body might be curled in, our head might be down. And if you've actually ever been rejected in your life, I'd like you to think of that just for the few brief moments. So we're going to put ourselves in that position. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself just for this moment in time. So if everybody just unmute your microphone if you can, unless you've got a party going in the background, but if you don't, unmute it. We're going to put ourselves in this position of rejection. And then on the count of 3, with as much enthusiasm as you can bring up in that position, we're going to say this sentence together. We're going to say, I am having a fantastic day. We're just going to notice our body language and how the chemistry lives in language. So if you'll do it with me. So just again, we're in kind of a rejected, we either anticipate that we've been rejected. And so, you know, shoulders down, head down, kind of bracing yourself, and just hold that for a moment, feeling that rejection. Just freeze your body there. And then just lift your eyes to the screen, but hold your position. And on the count of 3, let's be really enthusiastic as we say, I'm having a fantastic day. And just look at yourself. So 1, 2, 3. Let's say it together. I'm having a fantastic day. And you can unmute yourself. So I'm curious, if you were watching yourself, if you noticed a change in your body. Like, how difficult is it to say, I'm having a fantastic day, with your shoulders slumped. Like your whole body wants to shift. And I quickly glanced at some of you and saw a smile appear. So you didn't say, oh, smile when you say it. So just a point that there is chemistry happening in our body that's attached to certain words. So when we say the word fantastic, a little pinpoint goes to a different part of our brain, has an emotion of what we think fantastic feels like. When we say, I'm really excited about this, we actually, our body shifts to find the emotions of excitement. And when we communicate in protection mode, that also appears. Let's notice that. So let's talk about the list. Okay, so they're words and they exist and they have a tendency to demean our language. Let's talk about that. As I share this with you, I want you to notice if you say these words. Notice that you may not notice that you say these words. I say many of these words. And it's only when I invite a partner in to say, catch me when I say this, because I can't hear myself, that it's like, oh my goodness, there it is again, there it is again. So your brain becomes more aware. And again, the neurochemistry, what's fantastic about bringing things to our awareness is then we can change it. At one Toastmasters talk I was in, and I joined Toastmasters because of the message and the impact I wanted to make. That was clear. And what was clear is, what do I need to do to help make this message more clear? And I ask and invite you to the same. You have a message, you have a difference to make. Be clear about what that is. And then be clear on the work to take everything else out of the way so that you can stand strong and powerful in your message. As we share this list of words, they're only a list, they're only words. Notice if you say them, and I'm going to use the word in a sentence, and I'd like you to notice what happens when I say it in a sentence and what happens when I just delete it. And notice again the energy, notice the chemistry, notice the shift and how it may shift in the here. So let's see what we have. You're not going to be surprised. How about the word just? I just want to say, delete it. I want to say. It doesn't change the meaning. I want to say, or at least I brought this forward. Delete it. I brought this forward. Let it land. I think, I say this often, well, I think that it would be good to do this. Of course I'm thinking it. It would be good to do this. Let it land. Or maybe you should leave. How about you should leave? Notice how it lands. Sort of. Well, the new system sort of goes like this. The new system goes like this. Notice how it lands. If you're Canadian and if you're really sorry, say sorry. But if you're not, delete it. Sorry, I can't work late tonight. I can't work late tonight. You know what I mean? No, I don't know what I mean. I don't know what you mean. You're the one talking. You do the heavy lifting. You explain it to me. Let it land. And then the word but. We know that our brain hears the last few words. I mean, if I asked you, okay, let's just quickly stop, put pause on this, record, write down everything I've said so far, that the speaker has said so far. You'd probably just like freeze because you have no idea what I said 5 minutes ago, but you do remember what I just said now. In the same way, the word but is what lands. And as leaders, there are things that need to land. Here's an example, could be a performance review, could be just some instruction that you need to give to someone. And this is what you say, or this is what's said to you. You're a really great team leader, but brace yourself. You need to show up for meetings on time, fully prepared. You can still use the word, but only use the negative at the beginning. You need to show up fully prepared for all the meetings. Show up on time. But you're a really great team member. Oh, okay, I'll do that. And then we know the classic is if you can replace the word but for and, chances are both parts of the sentence are true. They're not better or worse, they're both true. You are a really great team member, and you also need to start showing up for meetings on time, fully prepared. There's a few others, and we won't take time to go into them, but there's the nervous laughter. We say something and there's this nervous laughter. Notice that we think it's just the way we are, which is another line we use. Well, it's just the way I am. Well, just the way you are is blocking your message. It's sabotaging the impact that you want to make. So yes, just the way you are, it's the height you are, the color of your eyes. As I said on a call this morning, you know, the color of that our hair really is, if I'm not sure, remember what that is. But, you know, recent research and science shows us that there is this thing called neuroplasticity that we can change. So let's notice the words that we use. And we'll take another poll right now to say, what are the words that you may be aware that you use that may diminish and sabotage your influence? So we've just taken a few of these. What words? You know what I mean? Oh, sorry, this poll won't take too long. Let's notice that we don't feel so alone when other people might use some of the same words that we do. They're ingrained in us. We may not hear ourselves, but these are an example of the dirty little words that sabotage the impact, the message, the point, the purpose of your career, of your business, of all things sustainable. So that the words and the message that you use, that there are worlds in the words, and that these words tend to live in the part of our brain that protects us. And when we show up in protection mode, it's not as powerful. We can feel ignored. Well, it's just the way I am. Here's the beautiful thing, is we can shift and grow. And I do hope for each of us that learning is lifelong. It's my belief that you do have message and you do have an impact and that it is worth sharing. So let's talk about how do we get there? There is a way to shift. There is a way to rewire the way we've always spoken and those little default habits. It's really helpful if you can invite an accountability person, someone who's not going to judge you, but is going to help you keep track. In fact, at one point when my children were small and in my home, I told them I'd give them like a nickel for every time I use the word just. Well, by the end of the day, really, I felt like I'd emptied my bank account and I was like really upset at them for, you know, finding all these words in my vocabulary, but they were so invisible that I needed somebody else. So we're going to talk about this. Again, thousands of clinical research, thousands of studies of clinical research show us that change is possible. So if you've noticed these words, and if you're really clear about the message and the difference that you want to make, then there's good news. Here's the tool. Notice, name, and choose. If there was a functional MRI hooked up to your brain, when you are in protection mode, that little pinpoint would be in the back of your brain, like just in the back here, where the primitive brain or the amygdala is, where cortisol shoots through our body. It's more than cortisol. There's a cortisol chemical cocktail that shoots through our body really rapidly, intuitively, instinctively to protect us from harm. And so when we are triggered or we're wanting to make an impact, or we just live in protective mode, it's not even a trigger, it's just our default. Oops, just our defaults? It's our defaults. Dirty little word. So when we notice it, that functional MRI then goes to a different part of our brain, like to the neocortex, says, oh, there's that familiar word again. And we choose how to respond to it. And the functional MRI then goes to our prefrontal, where we can say, what would be a wiser, better way to say this? And we think from different parts of our brain. Notice, name, and choose. When we notice, Dan Siegel, who many of you may have heard of him, he is a clinical professor in the School of Medicine in UCLA. And he says where attention goes, neural firing flows and neural connections grow. I'm going to say that again. That's about noticing. Noticing brings it to the surface. So where attention goes, neural firing, our brain begins to fire in that way. Neural firing flows and neural connections grow until the new way is we speak, letting our language do the heavy lifting. We have both feet on the floor and the impact is there. Whether someone chooses to receive it or not may be more about their story, but you are doing your part. By the way, what time is it? Pause. That was an exercise, an illustration to notice where our attention goes. Oh, let's look at what time it was. That's where the connection was. See how simple that is just by noticing that. So noticing, that's where we begin to rewire. It's quite fascinating. Okay, naming it. When we name it, again, we recontextualize. It's like watching a video of ourselves in the third person. We are distanced from it. Oh, there's that familiar word of just again. And we recontextualize and redirect, and our brain begins to rewire when we name it. So we bring it from below the surface where we can address it. We notice it, we name it, and once we name, we choose how we're going to respond. We're going to delete that. Here's an example. Another phrase I use way too often is a phrase I think. It's redundant. Of course I'm thinking it. That's why it's coming out of my mouth. So when I'm speaking, I will way too often say, I think that. And when I hear myself, I notice and name it, I pause and I start over because I'm training my brain. So I think that what we're going to do next, and the more I can rewire that, the more it will come to live in my brain. Everything lives in language. And why does this matter? It matters because you matter. It matters because your values, your purpose, your impact, your story, your experience, your message matters. Because you have a voice and a message to make a difference in this world. because within you lies a capacity to influence another life, to transform a community, to alter an industry, and in some way, your unique, powerful way to make a difference for the greater good in our messy, beautiful worlds. Everything lives in language. I hope you found some things that you can take away. I'll turn it back over to Will, to Denise, or Tanika, and I'll just stop my screen here.
Wow, thank you. That was such a good presentation, and I hate to admit, I as well use all of those phrases. So I think, you know, that old trick, you know, where you put an elastic band around your wrist. And but thank you, Lorraine. But now what we want to do is I'm going to be passing it off to our Vice Chair, Sharon. And what she's going to do is facilitate some questions, Q&A for, I'm just checking the time, we're at 8:38. So we have about 15 minutes that we can ask questions. And then of course, Lorraine is here to answer them. So I'm going to pass it off to Sharon. And thanks again, Lorraine, for that great presentation.
Thanks, Denise. And that was an amazing presentation with Lorraine, and very insightful, and gave us lots to think about. I'm monitoring the chat room right now to see if there's any questions. While we're waiting for questions to come in, Lorraine, one of the challenges that people have is often in conflict situations, whether they're dealing with their employees or whether they're dealing with sales calls and the possibility of client rejection. Do you have any insight or ideas around that?
Prepping and priming is always it. We show up wherever we are. So rejection is part of life. It's noticing where that lives in our body. Is the idea being rejected? Are we being rejected? And to stay in the conversation. When we are open, when we are curious, when we want to learn, the rejection is no or a shutdown. And to notice what we're going to say after that. So it's really preparing yourself and noticing what's happening in yourself. Again, the brain doesn't speak French or English. It speaks neuroscience, and it knows when we want to protect. So to stay in the place is to ask the next question, to really know and understand what matters. Let me circle back to the importance of being really clear on your purpose. What's the point and what's the message? And let that lead.
Perfect, thank you. We have one question come in. Do women use list words more than men?
I have not done the research, but this is what I know to be true, is that men don't have these kind of conferences, but they have never had a conference on the imposter syndrome. There is a lot of studies on some of the difference. This is what I say to each of us, is it may be male and it may be female and it may be you and it may be personality, but each of us can stand with who we are. Let's notice that our culture has brought about certain expectations, or our own story has brought about certain expectations about being seen and what's acceptable and how not to be rejected. So part of it's human. Men don't tend to, and you can do your own studies, they don't tend to apologize. They don't tend to say, well, I just have something I want to say. They say it. So we can compare ourselves, and we do. I would say to each of you, there's a thinking of, well, would a man say this? Well, then why do I say this? That's fun conversation. But really the conversation is, this is my message. This is what I have to say. Why is it not landing? Is there a way that I can change? If there is, I'm going to do that good growth. If there isn't, again, perception is biology. That's going to be how they are. And that's the story, maybe more about them. But to know that we get up every day and we have a really clear message along the way we get rejected, or the ideas get rejected, but our worthiness still stands tall and it doesn't stop us from moving forward with our impact.
Next question that came in, how best to mentor others that use the dirty little words?
This is so great. How can we help others? How can we empower others? Is asking permission to speak into their lives. You and I know what it is for people to have power over us. We know what that's like. The new way of leading is power with. We use words like collaborative, but we still have been trained and want to feel superior. So when we're mentoring others, we're on a journey together. So asking permission to speak to something that you've observed in them, and first helping them understand is, why is that important? Are you just correcting them because it serves you? And why does it serve them? So in another conversation, perhaps another idea sometime for a future presentation is how to build trust. There are 3 levels of conversation. Just really quickly, level 1 is the tell method. I'll tell you what to do. So we can do that with a mentor. Okay, I'm going to tell you, don't use these words. We can tell them, but there's no sustainability in them. The level 2 conversation is where we ask questions, but it's still with a leading agenda. A level 3 conversation is what builds trust, and that's where we share and discover together. So how that applies, Sharon, to the question is, we have somebody that we're mentoring or somebody in our office that is sabotaged by these words. Instead of level 1 conversation, hey, if you didn't use that word, I bet you'd get more impact. We can ask question 2, would you be open to hearing something that I've observed that might help you? So, you know, it's a leading question. It's not right or wrong. None of these are right or wrong. But let's just notice the neochemistry, how open that person might be to receiving. They may say, you know what, I'd really like to know, but not today. And the share and discover is, so I've observed some things, but what is important about your message? What are you noticing in your body? What are you noticing when you come into work? How many of us have entered a building with our body, but our spirit doesn't want to be there? So female leaders, it's my thought, it's my opinion, and that may be a demeaning phrase as well, but I'm using it in this context. It's my opinion that as leaders today, as female leaders, we have a really big leg up on being intuitive to what matters below the surface. We don't have to unlearn that. Most of us are really quite good in that. And giving language, not demeaning it, but giving language to sharing and discovering what matters about this to you. If we say that to our mentor, oh, I just always feel like I'm not good enough, I'm less than, I never get it right. They just dismiss my ideas. It's like, no, constant. It's like, oh, we thought of that already. Why is that important? And we begin to, we ask questions for which we don't know the answers and they may not know the answers. That's level 3 conversation. We begin to build trust. And we begin to bring things to awareness that really build the foundation. Oh, that's why it's important. It's not just a little word. It's not just like put on. So the fake it till you make it, you know, it's again, it's not integral. It's because we're pretending. But when we speak with our mentors about the dirty little words and we invite them into the place of being whole and transparent and clear on why it matters for this dirty little word to move on, we're more attached and committed to actually moving it on.
Women traditionally have faced the glass ceiling in terms of getting promotions and moving forward. And so many women struggle with how to ask for what they want. Do you have any suggestions?
I do. Ask for what you want without the dirty little words, without the verbal processing, without the trying to convince. I want to have a meeting with you. I have something to ask. So you're going to have done a lot of the work before, but you're going to notice the dirty little words that may come up there. I would like a wage increase for $2,000 a month, and here's why. What we tend to do, and there isn't a right or wrong, let's notice it. It's, I've been doing all this work and I've been putting lots of over hours and I've got all this expertise, and we're protecting ourselves. But we could say $2,000 a month would be a really great increase. Here's why. And let it land. They may say, oh, wow, our company doesn't have that kind of budget. Okay, fair enough. Let's go from there. So it really is, again, how we show up. What they say and what happens there belongs to them. What our part is noticing our response without the dirty little words.
Thank you. We have one other question. Someone has talked about one of their coworkers having a nervous laugh, and is there a healthy way of addressing that?
So let's just circle back to collaborating, power with. Is it important to them? Do they notice it? Why would it be important? And just asking for space to come into that. If that person in the office is supposed to be producing certain things and they're not, and you as a colleague or a supervisor feel that they need some improvement, then there's a conversation for that. Again, but beginning the conversation, putting them in a safe mode. Psych safety is a really big deal. Why does that matter? Asking permission and knowing that there are worlds and words, even in the power of your words as you speak to them.
This seems like something that you could start very early as parents with your children. Did you ever do that?
I tried a lot of things with my children. Some things worked, some things did not. And then, Sharon, I realized that some things were more about me than about helping them be their best. We noticed that, you know, what are other moms doing, or what will look good? What is my idea of a good citizen? What will be helpful to them? So it's a fascinating study and conversation. Here's the really great news. Our cells have the capacity to rewire. We can keep changing. It's noticing. It's once we notice, we can keep changing.
Well, I don't see any other questions. Is there something that you would like to add?
I'd like you to consider this quote. Kaufman wrote the book Conscious Business. And he said this, and it's a slight paraphrase. He said, you are 200% responsible for everything you say, 100% responsible for how you say it, and 100% responsible for how the hearer hears it. I'll leave that with you.
Thank you so much. Well, Lorraine, it has been an enlightening and empowering morning, and you've left people with lots of inspiration to go start their day. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd just like to remind folks that February 18th at 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, Overcoming the Imposter Syndrome, you can sign up at womeninleadership.ca. And with that, I'm going to give you back 10 minutes of your day, and we look forward to seeing you all again on February 18th.
Thank you, Sharon. Sorry, there was just one question. I think, Sharon, I know it's really hard to moderate and everything, but a few people kind of liked it, but I think there's a bunch of stuff after, but it was around resources, Lorraine. And I think, let me just open up the chat here, is it asks, outside of your fantastic coaching and resources, are there other tools that you utilize that we could incorporate into our daily lives? Podcasts, books, resources that you recommend? Also, where can we find you? Like Instagram, you know, of course, all the social media stuff.
Yeah, you can find me in all the social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. I have a website, Lorraine Richmond Leadership Coaching. So you could just type that in. A really great book. There's a lot of really great books and a lot of really great resources. But there is one, Conversational Intelligence, really has a lot of the background of what I've been speaking about. It's by Judith Glaser, a lot of neuroscience there that really shows, and it's really practical and well written. is Amanda Blake has written the book, Your Body, Your Brain, some really great resources there. So it's practicing it. There's always so much information. Take some information and work it into yourself.
There's one more other question that came in, Lorraine. You're just no one wants to let you leave. About taking notes. I'm worried about reading from my notes rather than speaking more spontaneously. How do you feel about bringing notes into a meeting?
Let's notice if the notes are because you have so much information that you need to present and they're what you need, or let's notice if they are your protector. Let's notice that first. Because if they're your tools, because of all the data and all the information, they're part of your kit. They're part of your tools. Let's notice if you depend on them, because it's easier to look at your notes than to notice the expressions around the table or to notice the nuances, what's happening. Let's notice that. Not a right or wrong. Many of these things, there is not a right or wrong. You will find people doing all of the above or none of the above. And you will notice the presence of people by what happens and how they are on the inside.
Perfect. People are asking about whether this recording is going to be sent out, and it will be sent out tomorrow. So you will get a chance to listen to it all again if that's what you want. Pick up some of the insights you missed the first time around. Any other questions? Comments that this was a fantastic presentation. So Lorraine, thank you again for your time this morning and for giving us such a great start for today.
You're welcome.
Thanks. All right, everybody, look for the recording tomorrow and make a great day.
Thank you.
Scared.